So again, you can increase or decrease the stressor. It's your perception of stress is one. Very important. How are you perceiving it? Is it, oh my God, I can't take this anymore, or okay, let's see how I can overcome this? Is this a challenge, or is this just a distressing experience? We always decide, is it a threat? Interpretation is key, and the big researcher that we know about and talk about is Lazarus. Lazarus is the big name, and he's going to suggest this interpretation is a cognitive response. So you have a threat or an interaction that is a stressor, that has a natural tendency to be a stressor. How you evaluate it or appraise it, can diminish the negative health effects of the stressor. This is a big one. So again, how you interpret it. If you have control, that's a mediator. Social support is a mediator. Your personality, different types of personality can be a mediator, or help either exacerbate or reduce the impact of the stressor. We have different types of coping. Adaptive coping, something that is wholesome, it helps you respond in a positive way. Or you have maladaptive coping, which is self-medicating, something that just gets you through it but is damaging to your health or to your lifestyle. And then the last thing in mediators are the defense mechanism. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. We would like to do a little activity with it next week. It's a really fun one. We gotta have some fun in here once in a while. Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, the goal is, the first one is how we perceive it. That's for sure gonna be Lazarus. That's basically interpreting or appraising the stress. And then we have these different characteristics. If you have control, it reduces stress. Social support is a way of coping and reducing it, etc. So the goal is make sure you're able to talk about Lazarus, as well as how each one of these can reduce or increase stress. Okay, pretty easy. And it's useful, and you're all going to be involved in this situation someday. Maybe some of this will help you. Any questions? You want to move on? You ready? Yeah. The first is cognitive appraisal. Everybody knows what these words mean? Any questions? So you're thinking and you're making a judgment. You're making a judgment based on the stress or on the stressor. Lazarus is the researcher. We can reduce our physiological response based on our cognitive appraisal, based on our thinking. In the textbook, or in the Bernstein, he uses the example of this. What the evidence for this is, if you are prepared, you can respond in a better way. If you know how to think about whatever the stressor is going to be. You clear? You remember the example of the training film? People who basically were trained to interpret the film one way had a diminished stress response. Do you remember that from the reading? Mm-hmm. Okay. People who had no training and saw this graphic example had an increased stress response. And so that's giving evidence to the concept that your thinking, your interpretation, your appraisal can diminish the effects of the stress or the stressor, the physiological effects. You can stay calm. Police are trained, firemen, nurses, and doctors with exposure to these horrible things, they, training, basically learn how to deal with it. Probably people in the military, for sure, they're trained on how not to be scared when someone's shooting at you, or how not to run away when someone's shooting at you, right? The runaway response, the sympathetic nervous system is the natural response. But what overcomes that natural response is your cognitive abilities, your training, your ability to control your emotional response, your physical response. They still get scared, but their tendency is to run away. But they're able to stay there and do it because they're thinking. They're thinking about how to respond in this situation. Okay, clear? Did we ever talk? We didn't talk about catastrophic thinking. Is the term catastrophizing. Catastrophizing. Have you ever heard that term before? Yes. Catastrophizing. Yeah. The first time I heard it was going to a therapist for my divorce, and I was going, oh, I really can't. I had I was raised in a family with 7 kids. I always had people around, in my house. There was a lot of commotion, etc. And then I got married really young, and always had people around. She had a big family, so we had always had people around. And as I'm getting towards the end of my marriage, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to be alone for the first time in my life, and I was like 45. 45 years old. I'd never lived alone, never, always had basically people around regularly. And I moved out, I was on my own, I was in this crappy little apartment, and then I went to the beach. Anyway, it got better. But I was like, oh my God, I'm alone. I don't like this. I hate this feeling. I'm a twin, you know that?
Yeah.
I was born with someone else, and at the same time. As a fetus, we were developing together. It was like I was never alone. You think that's not impacting my development of needing maybe social interaction, liking to have people around. And I was isolated, I was alone, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? So the therapist I was seeing, who was trying to help our marriage, she says, you're catastrophizing. This isn't the end of the world. You're projecting or thinking this is the end of the world, and it's not. It's just a difficulty you have to overcome. And when you catastrophize, when you think about issues saying, oh my God, it is so bad, you can't deal with it, you can't overcome it, and that's kind of what's going on here. Catastrophize, your thinking is so horrible. It's never that bad. You always perceive things worse than they are, and they do get better. And again, people with optimistic outlook are healthier. That's a big message I would like to send to you. If you remember, we're self-analyzing, we're self-monitoring. If you see yourself in a negative spiral of ideas, that just continues the negativity. You have to figure out a way to break the negativity or catastrophizing and try to reinterpret things in a more positive light. Remember, what's the connection with this? What's the other topic connected to this optimistic thinking? Early approach. It's humanistic. It's the total humanistic approach. You're going to have problematic things, etc. But if you can constantly or continually try to look for the more positive, it's going to help in the long run. Much more positive outlook. And again, I was a very kind of negative thinking person. I started looking more on the optimistic side, kind of retrained myself to look more optimistically, and it works. Mr. Richard is the perfect example of this. I've seen him unhappy a few times, but he gets over it quick, and he puts on that shiny facade. I'm sure it's a facade in some way, but he really projects that positive outlook. And that's a really good model, an example. I learned a ton of optimism outlook just being around him. So that's a really good characteristic. If you notice yourself, you're kind of negative, you might want to say, can I change? Well, it's can I change? Can you change? And when you monitor yourself, you know I'm being negative, boom, I can change it. One of the ways you change it, you smile, your motor cortex thinks you're happy, and you start to feel happier. Seriously. You smile, you try it. You're driving to work, you're smiling. I'm going to get myself in a good mood, Anyway. Or exercise. Exercise. Your endorphins. You know you're in a depressive mood or you're unhappy. Go and that's hard to do when you have depression or you're depressive because you don't want to move. But if you force yourself, your body will produce those endorphins that make you feel better. Okay, so we have a primary appraisal. Again, this is Lazarus. It's immediate. We'll see this again when we look at emotion. A primary appraisal. Is the situation relevant or irrelevant, positive or negative? If you see, Halloween and you see a clown, are you going to be scared?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, you see a witch, are you going to be scared on Halloween?
No.
What if the clown is like a 7-year-old kid?
Oh, no.
And it's a happy clown and it's like Bozo?
No.
Still no.
It's a clown! Okay. If you see a witch, a little person dressed in a green mask, child, are you going to be scared? Why not? Because you've already made,
going around killing people.
it's Halloween, and you've made an appraisal. This is not a threat. This is give candy to the kid, right? A secondary appraisal. A secondary appraisal, you've decided, okay, this is a threat and I need to marshal my resources. My sympathetic nervous system, I'm ready to fight or run or whatever. And then you say, what can be done about it? Assess your resources, choose a way to meet a threat or challenge. Try to cope with the threat. This is basically if you're encountered with a stress or stressful situation. So the primary appraisal, secondary appraisal. This is probably happening in the what's the first phase of GAS? Alarm reaction. Okay. It's probably happening in the first phase. Definitely this is happening in the first and or second phase. What's the second phase again?
Resistance.
Good. Okay. Again, how we perceive it, the perception, the interpretation is really important. There's a good stress. One of the questions I try to ask you to address is stress positive in any way? Is stress positive? Why? How? You remember, did you read that part yet? What do you think, Anita? Is stress positive in any way?
Yeah.
How?
It can encourage you to try harder.
That's right. A little pressure is good. You study more when there's pressure. You got a test in poli-sci, it's really important to you, you're going to study more. Right? Because you want to do well. Okay? So a little pressure is good. Too much pressure, too much stress, you shut down and you just crumble sometimes. Some people respond that way. So, I like a little stress. I mean, I don't know if I like it, but I do better when I'm stressed. I have to meet that challenge, and I have to take care of that challenge. I really can't function unless I overcome the issue that's bothering me. So it makes me work harder. So we call that eustress. Eustress is one that you see it as a challenge. You don't really have the negative effects of the physiology because you're mediating it. You're interpreting it as different way, as, oh my God, it's a catastrophe, versus, okay, I can do this. Let's rock this. Again, we already talked about these three ways: intellectualizers, the deniers, and the people who are unprepared. Again, how you are interpreting the stimulation or the experience. This is from the film they were talking about. These people are having more stress response. These people are having less stress response. The movie isn't true, or I'm processing this as part of a learning experience, or oh my God, they're bleeding. You see that? Yeah. Question?
Okay. The secondary appraisal, would that happen for eustress, like good stress?
Please put that away. Or if you really need to do that, you can go somewhere else. I'm sorry.
Will the secondary appraisal happen for good stress as well? Or is that kind of
Probably.
like a bad stress response?
Probably.
Okay.
I think so. Again, you can reduce the impact of stress if you're trained in advance. And that's kind of what I'm suggesting you're doing. By learning about this stuff, you're increasing your knowledge. And if you self-monitor and you know what's going on, you can modify the negative aspects of it, I think. I think that's kind of one of the big messages in this whole course. The more you know about the way psychology works, the natural connection is how can you take some of these messages and incorporate them. You're not going to do them all, but some of them you could. Another basic element is predictability. If you can predict it, you can anticipate it, you can prepare for it. Again, control. If you have some control, you can reduce the effects. People who perceive no control over negative events appear especially prone to physical and psychological problems associated with stress. Workers who perceive they have little or no control over their work environments were more likely to suffer from the negative health effects. So if you say, I have no control, I'm helpless, you're going to experience more damaging effects of stress. If you have some control, you're going to process it better. They say some teachers don't experience the same negative effects of stress. They don't get burnout because they have control in their occupation generally. I control everything that goes on in here, who I'm supposed to. I feel like I have some control, whether or not I really do. I control what we do each day. I can control most of the students pretty good. It's a higher status position compared to some other lower functioning position. And they say people with higher status positions don't necessarily have the same negative effects of the stress because of the type of function, the type of control they have. Like the janitor or the custodian. Does the custodian who cleans the room at night have much control? No, he's told what to do this, this, and this. You know, how he does it, that may be lack of control. Do you get the idea? So predictability and control can reduce this amount of stress. Personality types. Some personalities are more susceptible to stress than others. You have kind of a pessimistic personalities and you have optimistic personalities, type A and type B. How do you respond to certain things? A disease-prone personality. Actually, let's stop here and let's continue with this tomorrow. We're all